Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is a budget gaming PC I put together with the Kingdom Come Deliverance II minimum system requirements in mind. According to the spec sheet here, we'll need an i5-8400 or Ryzen 5 2600, 16 gigs of RAM and a GTX 1060 6GB or RX 580. The VRAM for the 580 isn't specified, but I've gone with the 8GB card, a much more sensible choice in 2025. I also opted for the i5-8400 and 16GB of dual channel 2666MHz DDR4. Nothing fancy. This configuration should be good for 1080p 30fps, according to the minimum specs. I'm also using Windows 10 as well as a 1TB M.2 SSD. I believe the minimum suggested cards here were actually the first game's recommended specs, but let's get into the options menu first of all. Oh, and the game actually starts, by the way, as you can see, which is always a bonus. That's my first concern out of the way, you never know these days. The graphics menu allows us to choose an overall preset as well as the expected VSync, FPS limit and FOV options. Although I could only choose between a 30 or 60 FPS cap from this menu, it doesn't actually apply if VSync is turned off. There's no unlimited FPS or off option, but as long as VSync is disabled here, then the frame rate will be uncapped. With the RX 580 we can also choose FSR upscaling if we wish. There is a DLSS option too if we have a modern Nvidia card installed. I went with the 580 because I usually go with Nvidia for these videos, and I just fancied a change. Under the advanced options we have more visual settings to choose from, but we'll be starting at low with SMAA1X. I won't turn AA off completely here because there are a lot of jagged edges. According to the requirements, this should be good for 30 frames per second at 1080p. The good news is we're actually getting nearly double that. I've started off with some footage from pretty early on, as I always do with these videos, to try and avoid significant spoilers. I was a little distracted from the swordplay with Hans Cape on here by the occasional flickering texture. I'm not sure if this is a VRAM thing, a game thing, or my RX 580 is on its last legs, but what I will say is that this didn't happen every time I loaded a save. Only sometimes, but it's definitely worth noting. The 6-core, 6-thread i5-8400 seems to be holding up well too. This is how you optimise a game. It's refreshing to be able to use 7-8-year-old hardware with a modern title and not have to run it at upscaled 540p or lower just to scrape by at 30 FPS. I then loaded up a save from another pretty early point in the game. This is Troskowitz, a lovely little settlement just outside the castle walls. Performance here is a little smoother. As you can see, some of our flickering issues seem to have gone. I did notice a weird shadow above Henry's head sometimes. You may be able to pick it up in the gameplay. It looks like he's got tree branches sprouting out of his brain for some reason, like something out of The Last of Us. Reloading the game resolved this, but just keep an eye out for this weird visual glitch because it is quite amusing. Performance wise, we were averaging above 60 with this hardware. This game does seem to run better than the first in terms of consistency. Using a CPU like this would have certainly caused more frame time issues, certainly in and around busier towns in Kingdom Come 1. I don't want to comment too much actually because we're still early on in the game here, and of course there may be areas that really strain this aging hardware. So far though, and so good. As a side note, I'm really enjoying this sequel. It looks decent, the characters are great, there are some really funny moments, and of course it runs well. I haven't enjoyed a game quite as much as this in a long time, and I've only just started it really. It's an absolute gem. Back to performance, and I decided to enable FSR and set it to quality mode just to give us a little bump without sacrificing too much in terms of the visuals. In and around town here we saw a lovely increase to over 70 FPS. I thought the days of 60 plus frames per second with a 580 had long gone. Of course this area isn't as intensive as the camp we tested at the start, so if we head back there with the same settings we'll still notice a drop overall, but a 60 plus FPS average nonetheless. The percentile lows were also improved. Again, it's important not to generalise and say this is going to be the case throughout, as with all of these minimum spec videos, but this is a good first impression and does show that this older hardware can still handle a modern release without extreme visual sacrifices. I then switched to medium to see if it was still playable, even at native resolution. And it was, if you are okay with less than 60 frames per second, of course. I believe we averaged somewhere around 40, but the exact numbers will be up on screen as always. I wouldn't really push it any higher than this, to be honest, but those happy with 40 odd frames per second will be pleasantly surprised if using hardware like this. The game does look noticeably better than it does with low as well. Now, of course, you don't have to stick to presets, you can mix and match various settings. I only stick with the presets for the sake of the benchmarks, as it's easier for the sake of reference. Now, 60 FPS is also possible with the medium preset, but not consistently, no matter the FSR option we choose. For example, I tried performance mode and we hit 62, but there were still some drops below this, and I imagine that as the action heats up, frame rates will fall. I guess this could be said for any of the settings with this hardware, so go with what you are happy with. I like that the game also tells you that the performance preset will make certain text hard to read, which is a nice touch. Overall, I'm really happy with what I've seen today. Both the CPU and GPU are around 7 years old, and it's nice to see that when paired with 16GB of RAM, Kingdom Come Deliverance II will run respectably, even without upscaling. It's clear that a lot of passion went into this game, and in this case that seems to extend to making this more accessible to a wider audience, those who may not have upgraded their systems in a while. More intensive presets and settings are available, which we'll be messing around with soon. I'm sure they will put even the best hardware through its paces, but for those on a tighter budget, or as I say, those who haven't upgraded their PC in a while, this one is still playable and enjoyable, at least from what I've tested so far, on the minimum specs. I've yet to test a 1060, but I have seen a few videos and it looks like performance is a little worse, but still playable to some degree. I might get to a busy town and the frame rate gets completely decimated with this hardware, but if that is the case, I'll keep you posted. Now, I'll have a few more Kingdom Come Deliverance II videos coming up because I really am enjoying this one. I think we'll mess around with DLSS as well, DLSS 4, because despite what I said, upscaling is still fun to mess around with, even though I don't like how it's become somewhat of a reliance for certain hardware and certain games, but that's probably a rant for another day. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video has been helpful. I'm off to play some more Kingdom Come Deliverance. Might be a while before my next video because I'm completely addicted to this. But hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.